Assalamualaikum everyone, I hope you guys are doing well. So this video is for AdMath students who have their exam in May, June 2025. Why? Because in this video, we're going to be discussing what you can expect in paper 1 and paper 2. This is not by any means a video in which I'm going to give you guys a guest paper. You guys know I don't do that. In this video, we're just going to discuss what topics you can expect in paper 1, what topics you can expect in paper 2. Why, or the reason why we're doing this is because the paper pattern has been changed. If you guys are aware, we should be by now. There are some topics that have been added, some topics have been removed. I've done a video on it, you can check that out. But in this video, we're gonna be, looking at the paper pattern at a very micro level. We're gonna see because paper 1 is now not a calculator based paper, so we're gonna see what topics are such that where you don't really need a calculator, which means we can expect them in paper 2. Okay, like I said, disclaimer, this is by no means a guest paper or an expected paper kind of a video. You guys know how to do that. But anyway, if you're new here, then my name is Saad and you're watching Mathlete by Saad. Make sure to subscribe to the channel because I make videos like these and exam tips and tricks. And make sure to like this video and share it with whoever you think can possibly benefit from it. Now, so what I've done here is I basically divided papers into 3 different categories. Now, once again, a disclaimer, every paper has a specific concept which can be a non-calculator, which can come in the non-calculator paper, and every topic has concepts where you need a calculator. So we can't really say that in this topic you don't need a calculator at all, and just like that we can't say that in this topic you need a calculator in order to be able to solve it. Okay, so any topic can come, any concept of any topic can come in any paper, but we're just trying to basically we're trying to figure out where you can mostly expect it. Okay, so these are 3 categories: mostly non-calculator, meaning that most of the questions you don't require a calculator; mostly calculator, meaning that most of the questions you do require a calculator; 50-50, this means that it's in some questions you do, or in some concepts you do, in some concepts you don't. Okay, so let's start with mostly non-calculator. So the first topic, okay, I don't like this color. The first topic of mostly non-calculator is basically simultaneous equations. So if you know simultaneous equations, yes, it helps if you have a calculator. You might end up with a quadratic equation towards the end, and you can use a calculator to check your answer. Or even if, let's say, you don't end up with a quadratic equation, you have a linear equation, then yes, having a calculator really helps, but you don't really need a calculator in simultaneous equations. Then number 2, quadratics. So quadratics is also another topic where you mostly don't need a calculator. Why? Because you have concepts such as curve sketching, quadratic inequalities, discriminant, which then lead to a quadratic inequality, disguised quadratic. So again, it really helps if you have a calculator, but if you don't, then you can still do it without actually using a calculator. Then number 3, polynomials. So in this also, it helps if you have a calculator, but you don't really need it. You can solve it, you can factorize a cubic equation. There's a way to do that. You can find the first factor through trial and error, and the rest of the factors by long division, synthetic division, or identities. So yeah, most of the questions of remainder theorem, you don't really need a calculator. Having said that, yes, if you do have it, then that's cool. We can verify your answers, but so be it. Anyway, then number 4, coordinate geometry. Now, most of the questions of coordinate geometry do not require a calculator. Okay, like for example, you want to find out the equation of a straight line, you want to find out the gradient, you want to find out the midpoint, you want to find out maybe the equation of a perpendicular bisector. In some cases, like for example, you want to find out the area. So some lengths may be in surd form, or some lengths, maybe you want to find out a length, some length may be in surd form. So that is where you might need a calculator. But majority of the questions of coordinate geometry, and this by the way includes coordinate geometry of a straight line as well as a circle, which is something that has been recently added. I've done a whole stream on it. I've covered all the concepts. Make sure to check it out. But even in those questions, there are some areas where you might need a calculator. So like I said in the beginning, that every topic can have a question where you need a calculator, but mostly these topics are such where you don't need a calculator. So yeah, that's that. Then number 5, you have logs and exponents. So logs and exponents is also another topic where you don't need a calculator, although I should mention that there are some scenarios where you have a logarithmic equation, an exponential equation where you have to use logs to solve it. That is where you absolutely need a calculator. But majority of the questions, require rules of logs, the product law, the quotient law, the power law, the change of base law, and all those kind of questions where you have to sort of express it in terms of x and y or solve it through substitution. So once again, majority of the questions are such that you don't need a calculator. Same goes for exponents as well. And then number 5 is vectors. So once again, majority of the vectors questions are such that you don't need a calculator. Yes, it would be great to have one, but like I said, the concepts are such that you can solve them very easily without a calculator. Now let's talk about mostly calculator. So number 1 is linear law. Now linear law is a topic which, if you look at the official syllabus, they've basically included it in the coordinate geometry of a straight line, but I like to keep it separate. I like to teach it separately as well. But linear law is a topic where you need a calculator because you have to find out, you basically need to take log of values or maybe ln of values to find out the values that are either going to go on the x-axis or y-axis. So this is one of those topics where you can't do it without a calculator. Then number 2 is permutations and combinations. Now permutations and combinations have a concept where you're supposed to be able to solve permutations and combinations without a calculator, as in you should know how to deal with NPR, you should know how to deal with NCR if you don't have a calculator, and we use that in binomial also. Okay, so binomial comes in 50-50. Okay, we're going to talk about that later. So yeah, but mostly because the values are so big, if you've done permutation combination questions, the answers that we get are sometimes in thousands, sometimes even in millions. So that is why you need a calculator. But like I said, this is mostly calculator, not entirely calculator. So there are some concepts in permutations combinations where that might actually swing in paper 1, where you're not allowed to use a calculator. Okay, but mostly it's a calculator topic. Now number 3, functions. So functions is, not functions. Functions is going to go in 50-50. Number 3 is actually circular measure. So circular measure questions are also such that you need a calculator. You cannot solve them without a calculator. But once again, there may be some questions where you're just supposed to maybe find an expression and leave it there. Those kind of questions you can do without a calculator. And then last, mostly calculator paper is mostly calculator topics is kinematics. Now I know for those of you who might have seen the specimen paper. In the specimen paper, they've given a question on kinematics in paper 1 where you don't need a calculator. But like I said, in most of the questions you don't need a calculator, but you can still have a question on kinematics where you are not allowed to use a calculator, which means that it is designed to be done without a calculator. Okay, so keep one thing in mind, that if you have a paper in which you're not allowed to use a calculator, it's not because Cambridge wants you to put through hell, but it's just basically testing your mental math, and it's testing how well you can do questions independently, and it's going to be designed in a way that you can do it without a calculator. Okay, so I've seen students making a big deal of it. I know it's a major change. It was shocking for me also when I heard it, but when I looked at the specimen paper and when I actually did some thinking, so it turns out that most of the questions are such that you can actually do them without a calculator. Now we're going to talk about 50-50. So 50-50 basically means that in some concepts you need a calculator, in some concepts you don't. Okay, so I really couldn't categorize these topics or put them into one category. So that's why I have a third category for these topics. And number 1 is differentiation. So if you think about it, if let's say you're just asked to differentiate, okay, it doesn't matter whether it's product rule, quotient rule, but if you're just asked to differentiate a certain function, that means you can do it without a calculator. Okay, you might even be able to plug in a certain value of x and be able to solve it without a calculator. You might be able to solve for the equation of normal, but for questions such as rates of change, for questions such as stationary value, finding out the nature of stationary value, if let's say you end up with an exponential function or logarithmic function, for those obviously you need a calculator. So like I said, 50-50, some concepts can be in paper 1, some concepts can be in paper 2. Okay, so I should mention that mostly calculator are basically going to be paper 2 topics, mostly non-calculator are going to be paper 1 topics. So this can be either paper 1, paper 2. Same goes for integration. So integration is also 50-50. Why? Because you may be asked to integrate a function. That's it. You don't need a calculator. And previously also students who were preparing for or prior to 2025, they also didn't need a calculator if, let's say, they were just asked to integrate. And even if, let's say, you were asked to integrate and the question is such that you can plug in the limits, find the area, then if it comes in paper 1, that means it will be designed in a way that you don't really need a calculator. So when you're practicing, make sure with these questions you only pick up your calculator and start using it when you absolutely feel the need to. If, let's say, you want to find out ln 1.5, so obviously you can't figure that out without a calculator, so that is where you absolutely need it. But when you're just integrating, when you're just differentiating, you don't need it. When you start plugging in values, that is where you might need it. Then number 3 is functions. So functions also is mostly, actually functions is 50-50, okay? So there may be some questions of domain and range. Let's say you're given a quadratic function and you're supposed to find out the range. Very easy, you don't need a calculator. But what if you're given an exponential function, you're supposed to find out the range? You might need a calculator. What if you're given a logarithmic function, you're supposed to find out the range? You might need a calculator. So let's say you're supposed to plug in values in a logarithmic function and give the result, or maybe take inverse of an exponential function and then plug in a certain value. So obviously for those kind of questions you need a calculator, but in some areas such as domain and range, of quadratic, or maybe just finding the composite function, up until the expression part, or just finding the inverse function once again up until the expression part, that is where you don't need a calculator. When you start plugging in values, that is where you need it. Then there is APGP. So my observation is that AP questions are basically such that you can do them without a calculator. Once again, it's very nice. It would be nice to have a calculator, but GP questions are such where you need a calculator. So that's why it's 50-50. You can expect AP questions in paper 1 or GP questions in paper 2. Once again, this is not like full and final verdict. It's just basically after looking at the pattern, this is what I've been able to come up with. Now, number 5, and I believe, no, this is the second last, that is trigonometry. So reason why I've put trigonometry in 50-50 is because yes, in trigonometric equations, you do need a calculator, okay? But now be careful, there are some values that you're supposed to memorize, angles of certain values that you're supposed to memorize. That's 0, 30, 45, 60, 90. So sine of these angles, cos and tan of these angles, I've made a video on it, you can check it out. But if, let's say, you're talking about identities, you don't need a calculator. If, let's say, you are talking about making a sketch of sine, cos or tan, you don't need a calculator. If, let's say, you're talking about, you're given a graph and you're supposed to find out the period, amplitude and the constant, you don't need a calculator. So 50-50, in some areas, yes, you do. In some areas, yes, you do not need a calculator. Then last, and that is binomial theorem. So binomial theorem is also, although this you can say is debatable, mostly this could be non-calculator, but I've noticed that in some cases the values are such that you absolutely need a calculator. Let's say you want to work out 16C4, so it's best that you have a calculator, or maybe 9C2. Well, that is debatable, you can do it without a calculator, but in most of the questions I've noticed, actually no, not most, 50-50 once again. In some questions I've noticed that you don't need a calculator, but if the power of the expansion is small, you can do it without a calculator. If the power of expansion is significantly large, then you do need a calculator. So yeah, and the binomial theorem also has a certain concept in which you cannot use a calculator at all. That is basically NCR, expansion of NCR without a calculator. So make sure that you practice that. I think I have a stream on it or something. I'm pretty sure I do. So yeah, make sure to check it out if you don't know what I'm talking about. So yeah, that's it. I hope this helps you prepare for the exam. I know a lot of students are completely unaware. I get queries like, is so-and-so part of the syllabus and so still, what is the paper pattern? Or students message me asking me questions from topics that have been removed a long time ago, even before 2018. So it's best that you go on the website, download the syllabus, keep it in front of you, and then prepare for the exam, so that, or solve past papers, so that If there's a question on a topic which is no more part of the syllabus, you can skip that. So yeah, that's it. I hope this helps. Let me know what your thoughts are of the new paper pattern. And don't forget to share this video with whoever you think can possibly benefit from it. And that's it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, take care. Allah Hafiz.